Wait.
Most of you know me for giving short and sweet, to the point, getting off the mic. This might be a little longer. It's not a 20-minute speech, but it might be 7 minutes. Let's call it 7 to 10 minutes, okay? But I wanted to share something. The purpose of this trip is really not just to experience it now, but to take something back into our lives. And so after Auschwitz, on the way back, I figured most of us might want to reflect on what we just experienced, and I didn't want to intrude on that. So I thought on the way there, I just wanted to share with you something that I think you could really take home with you and implement in your lives. I do want to mention a couple things. First of all, when I speak every Tisha B'Av, those of you who know, I always give a strong encouragement, instructions that you should do Holocaust research on Tisha B'Av, because the yeshiva world does not commemorate Yom HaShoah for the most part. And our Yom HaShoah, we believe, based on the Rishonim, the way they responded to the Crusades, and the way that they responded to 1648, the Khmelnytsky massacres, they didn't establish a new day. Tisha B'Av is the day. So there's a film, if you have Amazon Prime, it's a film called Auschwitz, the Nazis and the Final Solution. It's an 8-part docu-series by the BBC. It's excellent. How many of you have heard of Elie Wiesel? Okay, so Elie Wiesel, how many of you have read his books? Okay, so I'm going to tell you, Rabbi Reisman, when he was speaking about the Holocaust in his Navi Shir that he gives on Matzah Shabbos, when he talked about the Holocaust, he talked about how his generation all read the book Night, which obviously is a world-renowned book, and how important it was to give them a sense of what their parents would not, their parents would not speak about the Holocaust, and Rabbi Reisman talked about how they learned about it through the book Night, and I encourage you to read the book and maybe watch the docu-series if you can. How many people heard of Viktor Frankl? Okay, Viktor Frankl, I want to talk to you about him.
I read on Tisha B'Av from you.
You heard on Tisha
B'Av? I read his book. 4 years ago.
Oh wow, okay.
I read his book.
I want to tell you a little bit about Viktor Frankl, because I think this is something that you can really, like I said, take home with you. So who's Viktor Frankl? Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist before the war. He developed a theory of what drives man. And when he went to the concentration camps, he was able to observe his theories in action in one of the most stressful and pressurized environments as you can imagine. Now, he was a Yid. He was born in Vienna. He married in 1941. His wife was pregnant. She had to abort the baby. His wife went to Bergen-Belsen, and he went to Auschwitz. His father went to Auschwitz. His mother, I don't remember, went to a different concentration camp, brother and sister. Now, when he was in Auschwitz, he was appointed to be a Sonderkommando. I don't know if this was discussed yesterday. I'm sure it will be discussed today. These were Jewish prisoners that were appointed Sonderkommando, a special unit. These were Jews whose job it was to basically, after the gas chambers, bring the bodies and cremate them. That was their job. And they dealt with death a whole day. This is what they dealt with. They had to wait till the gas did its effect, and then they would take the bodies out. And we'll see when we get to Auschwitz, it literally was a factory. It was the most efficient factory for killing. The whole purpose of they learned from other camps what made things efficient. And one of the things they created was a lift. Like an elevator lift, a lift that you can pile bodies up to go from downstairs to gas chambers to upstairs to the cremation. And this is what he was involved with. Now, he came up with a theory, and he wrote a book after the war on his experience and on his theory. The book is called Man's Search for Meaning. It's a world-acclaimed book, sold at the time of his death in 1997, sold 10 million copies. It's in 24 languages. And it's a difficult read because of the contents of it, but it's not a lengthy book, but it's very, I found it to be tremendously inspiring. And I want to share with you some of what he writes in the book, and maybe we can connect with it. There's a lot of what he wrote that is quotes that people put on the wall in their office or in their homes to motivate them, motivational quotes. A lot of it comes from his book. So he developed a theory based on what he saw in the camp, was that when people arrived in the camp, there were they went through 3 stages. Like we talk about the stages of grief. He said people went through 3 stages various lengths of these stages. The first stage was the shock of what you were thrown into. The second stage was apathy for anything else and just survival, just finding your next meal, not caring about other people. And the third was a sense of hopelessness. And even some people who were liberated were unable to comprehend the liberation because they were just walking corpses. They had just become so hopeless that they weren't able to, their minds were not able to grasp the fact that they were liberated. So I want to mention, this obviously could be a 2-hour presentation. I just want to mention to you the 7 themes that he brings in his book, and hopefully if one of these strikes a chord with you, you'll take it home and research it a little more and hopefully take something out of it. So the first is to find a why. So his theory basically is, when man search for meaning, is that if your life has meaning, then you can get through terrible situations. So his first theme is find a why, find a meaning in life, and that will help shape your attitude, shape your experience. The second thing he wrote is that success and happiness is not something you can pursue. People want to be happy, and they run after happiness. He said that's not what you should be running after. Run after a mission, and when you accomplish, happiness and success will come on its own, but it's not something that you can control, and therefore it's not something you should set as your goal. The third is choosing your own attitude. How do you react to the situations you're in? He looked around in Auschwitz and he saw how people were dealing with the situation, and his theory was that the people who had a positive outlook, the people who looked for the light at the end of the tunnel, were the people who survived. This was very controversial because it obviously, the inference is that the people who died gave up hope, and that's not necessarily true, and this was a controversial one, but the idea is still a good idea about choosing the attitude. We can't control the situation, but we can control how we react to it. The fourth is, if you can change the situation, change yourself. It's very similar to the last one about learning to adapt to the environment you're in. The fifth theme was that suffering stops being suffering when you have meaning. So the theory is that even if you're in a very terrible, difficult situation, but if there's a purpose to it, you can endure it. And an example of this is surgery. Surgery is terribly painful, but a person knows that surgery is for a reason. There's hopefully will benefit your body and create a cure, and a person can undergo that. What's very depressing is when someone never goes through a machla, goes through a tzara, they don't understand the purpose, they want to know why. That's always the question that's asked. Why me? Why is God doing this? And he said, try to find your own meaning in what you're going through. The sixth was about the only way to connect with people, or I should say the strongest way to connect with people, is through love. He used to, at night, look forward to reuniting with his wife, who was in a different camp. He would have imaginary conversations with his wife to keep his mind going. And the last is, the world might be in a bad place, but we all have to play a part to make it better. And in this, he talked about how, as prisoners in Auschwitz, there were two types of choice. There was a choice that every prisoner had. You couldn't control where you went, you couldn't control if you left, you couldn't control when you ate. You could control one thing. What type of person were you going to be that day? Were you going to be a guy that steals the bread from the next guy? You're going to be the guy that pushes the guy out of line, take advantage? Or are you going to be a guy that helps your brother? And that was a profound lesson about changing. The one thing you can't control is changing how you react in that situation. And I found them all to be exceptional lessons. Any one of these could really, like I said, be a quote that you put up on the wall. The sad ending that he talks about is that after the war, his whole family, including his wife, was killed, except the sister who survived, who went to Australia. He did remarry. He's buried in a Jewish cemetery in Vienna. But the lesson that I took away, at least, was that the choice that everyone has every day. You don't always have good days. Some days are terrible days. But the one thing you can control is the attitude and the way you react. And I think that, at least for me, was a beautiful lesson. Any of these are really beautiful lessons that hopefully you can take and home with you and become better people from this experience. Thank you for listening.